I invited my parents and siblings to a luxurious Thanksgiving dinner because I was tired of being the daughter they described in whispers, the one who worked too much, smiled too little, and never quite belonged. I spent almost $15,000 on candles, flowers, a private chef, and a table set for 12. By 6 o'clock, every chair was still empty. Not one of them called. Not one of them came. They had abandoned me and gathered somewhere else. So I sat there alone, eating in humiliation. Then my grandpa walked in, placed an envelope in my hand, and said, "Open it. My name is Violet Sinclair, and by 41, I had learned how to make a room listen, not by shouting, not by begging, by walking in calm, prepared and impossible to ignore. I worked in crisis management, the kind of job where rich men with shaking hands called me after they had already ruined their own lives. I knew how to clean up scandals, rebuild reputations, and turn public disasters into controlled statements, but inside my own family, I was still treated like the odd daughter who took herself too seriously. My mother, Margaret, had a way of smiling at me like she was apologizing to the room for my presence. My father, Edward, used silence like a locked door, and my sister Celeste, beautiful, polished, and endlessly praised, had been the center of every family photo since we were children. Celeste was the daughter my mother understood. I was the daughter she explained. "She is just intense," Mom would say when I corrected a lie. "She means well," Dad would add when I refused to laugh at an insult. And Adrian, my younger brother, learned early that the safest place in our family was wherever Celeste was standing. Then there was Grant Whitmore, Celeste's husband. He wore expensive suits, spoke in financial phrases nobody questioned, and had the soft, confident cruelty of a man who had never been told no. My parents treated him like a trophy they had personally won. If Grant said a restaurant was elite, they went. If Grant said an investment was smart, they nodded. If Grant said I was difficult, they believed him before I even opened my mouth. That Thanksgiving, I wanted one night without the old roles. I wanted my mother to walk into my home and see the candles glowing along the dining table. I wanted my father to notice the staircase, the art, the quiet proof that I had built something real. I wanted Celeste to sit across from me without performing. I even put Grant's name card down with steady hands. The house smelled like roasted turkey, brown butter, cinnamon, and pine. The chef moved quietly in the kitchen. Crystal glasses caught the gold light from the chandelier. Outside, Atlanta was slipping into a cold November evening, the windows turning dark and reflective. I stood at the head of the table and touched my mother's name card for one foolish second. I let myself hope. Maybe tonight, they would finally see me. Then the clock struck 6. At first, I told myself they were late. That is what daughters do when they are still trying to protect people who keep hurting them. They invent traffic, dead phones, bad weather, anything softer than the truth. At 6:12, the chef stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a white towel. "Ms. Sinclair," he said gently. "Should I hold the first course?" I looked at the empty chairs. 12 place settings, 12 folded napkins, 12 little cards with names written in gold ink. 10 more minutes, I said. My voice sounded calm, but my fingers were gripping the back of a chair so hard my knuckles had gone pale. At 6:27, my phone finally buzzed. It was my mother, Violet. "We decided to have Thanksgiving at Celeste and Grant's place. It just makes more sense. Grant has important people over tonight, and we don't want to make the evening awkward. You understand. Happy Thanksgiving." I read it once, then again, then a third time, because some part of me was still looking for the sentence where she said she was sorry. There wasn't one. I called my father. No answer. I called Adrian. Straight to voicemail. Then I saw Celeste's profile glowing at the top of my screen. She was live. I should not have tapped it, but humiliation has a strange pull. You stare at the thing that is killing you because your brain refuses to believe it is real. The screen filled with bright penthouse lights, champagne glasses, white roses, and Celeste laughing like she had just won something, behind her. My parents stood near the windows, dressed beautifully, smiling like they had not just left their daughter alone at a table built for them. Grant lifted a glass toward the camera. "Now this," he said, "is how Thanksgiving should feel. No forced little dinner in some cold house where everyone has to pretend." Celeste giggled. Adrian laughed into his drink. My mother covered her mouth. But I saw her shoulders shake. That was the sound that broke something in me. Not Grant, not Celeste. My mother laughing. Someone in the live stream comments asked where I was. Celeste tilted her head with fake sadness. Violet wanted to host, she said, but tonight needed a different kind of energy. We all know how intense she can be. My father nodded once, like he was signing off on my erasure. I set the phone down beside my plate. The chef had left. The house had gone still. The turkey was cooling under perfect golden skin. The candles burned lower. My mother's name card sat untouched beside a glass she would never lift. I cut one small piece of turkey. It tasted like salt and shame. They had not forgotten me. They had chosen this. And somewhere deep in my chest, under all that humiliation, anger finally opened its eyes. The front door opened at 7:04. I heard the lock turn, then the slow, heavy tap of a cane against marble. Tap, step, tap, step. I did not move from the dining table. My grandfather, Howard Sinclair, walked into the room wearing a dark wool coat and the same expression he used when men tried to lie to him across boardroom tables. At 78, he still had the kind of presence that made silence feel like an order. His eyes moved over the empty chairs, the untouched food, the dying candles. Then he looked at me. Did they call? I slid my phone across the table. He read my mother's text. Then he watched 10 seconds of Celeste's live stream. Just 10. His jaw tightened. Stand up. Violet. I laughed once, but it came out broken. Grandpa, please, I can't do a speech right now. I didn't ask for a speech. He said, I asked you to stand. Something in his voice pulled me out of the chair. He walked to me and placed a thick envelope in my hand. It was plain, cream-colored, and heavier than it looked. What is this? The reason they chose his table over yours. My mouth went dry. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of payments, bills, bank records, legal notices, and a short audit summary. No dramatic labels, no secret codes, just paper. The kind of paper that ruins people because it does not need to yell. The first few pages showed Grant's unpaid bills, penthouse costs, car payments, event expenses, private club charges, everything polished on the outside, rotting underneath. He's broke, I whispered. Worse, Grandpa said. He's desperate. I turned another page. There were warnings from attorneys, notes from an accountant, records showing money moving in strange circles, always just enough to keep the illusion alive for another week. Then I saw the amount, around $2 million. My stomach dropped so hard I grabbed the edge of the table. The money had come from a fund my grandfather created for me years ago, a fund my parents once had limited access to when I was younger, a fund I had never touched because I wanted to build my life without leaning on anyone. My mother and father had used old authorization paperwork and misleading signatures to move that money toward Grant, not to save me, not to help the family, to protect Celeste's perfect life. The room tilted. For a second. All I could hear was the soft crackle of candles burning down to the wick. They stole from me, I said. Grandpa's face did not soften. That was his mercy. He refused to make it smaller than it was. Yes. I looked at the Thanksgiving table again. The gold name cards, the cold turkey, the glass meant for my mother. They had not just abandoned me. They had eaten somewhere else with money taken from my future. I picked up my phone and saved the live stream. I saved my mother's message. I took pictures of the empty table. Then I called my attorney. My voice did not shake when I said, I need you to review something tonight. Grandpa watched me close the envelope. For the first time all evening, I was not crying. I was listening, and beneath the silence, something inside me became very, very still. Grant's penthouse smelled like perfume. roasted meat, and expensive lies. The elevator doors opened directly into the room, and for 1 second, nobody noticed me. They were too busy laughing. Celeste stood near the windows with a glass of champagne in her hand, her phone still angled toward her face. My parents were behind her, glowing in the warm light like proud guests at a life they believed they had earned. Grant stood in the middle of it all. White shirt, rolled sleeves, perfect smile. The king of a room he did not own. Then my grandfather's cane hit the floor. Tap. The sound cut through the music. People turned. Conversations died. Celeste's smile froze first, then my mother's. Then Grant saw the envelope in my hand, and something small and frightened moved behind his eyes. Celeste recovered fast. She always did. "Violet," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this is not the time." I walked farther into the room. "You're right," I said. The time was 6 o'clock. At my house. At the Thanksgiving dinner I invited all of you to. My mother stepped forward, her face tight. "Don't do this here." Why, I asked. You had no problem doing it here. The room went quiet enough that I could hear ice shift in someone's glass. I lifted my phone and played the saved clip. Grant's voice filled the penthouse. No forced little dinner in some cold house where everyone has to pretend. Then Celeste laughing. Then Adrian. Then my mother's quiet, unmistakable laugh. I watched her hear herself. That was the first crack. "You told me you couldn't come because it made more sense to be here," I said. But that was not the truth. The truth is, you came here because Grant wanted an audience, Celeste wanted a stage, and all of you wanted one more chance to make me the joke. Turn that off. Celeste snapped. I did, not because she asked, because the point had landed. Grant gave a short laugh and spread his hands. "This is emotional." "I understand. Violet feels excluded. And now she wants to embarrass everyone." "No," I said. "I wanted a family dinner. You made it public. So now we can finish it in public." My father's voice came low and sharp. "Enough. You are humiliating this family." I looked at him. "You did that when you laughed." He had no answer. So Grant stepped in. "She's unstable," he said to the room. "This is what I've been saying for years. She takes everything personally." I placed the envelope on the nearest table. "Then let's be impersonal." My attorney had told me not to argue, not to accuse beyond what the records showed, and not to say anything I could not prove. So I did exactly that. I pulled out the first stack. "These are unpaid bills connected to this penthouse, private events, cars, and club fees, rounded total, hundreds of thousands." Grant's jaw tightened. "These are payment records showing money moved to keep those bills quiet." Celeste looked at Grant. "What is she talking about?" He ignored her. I pulled out the next pages. "These are notices reviewed by my attorney. They show that Grant's financial image is not what he has been selling in this room." A man near the bar lowered his drink. A woman in a cream dress quietly reached for her purse. Grant's smile disappeared. "You have no idea how finance works." "I know how proof works." Then I turned to my parents. "And I know where the last transfer came from." My mother's lips parted. "No," she whispered. I nodded once. "Around $2 million was moved from the fund Grandpa Howard created for me. Not by mistake, not by confusion, by old authorization paperwork and signatures that my attorney is already reviewing." The room changed. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was the sound of people deciding they did not want their names anywhere near Grant Whitmore. One guest walked toward the elevator. Then another. Then a third. Grant turned pale. "Violet, stop." That was the first honest thing he had said all night. My mother reached for my arm. "Honey, we can explain." I stepped back. "No. You can explain it to the lawyer. You can explain it to the bank. You can explain why you left your daughter alone at Thanksgiving while sitting here on money taken from her future." Celeste started crying, but there were no cameras pointed at her now. Grant looked around the room, searching for someone to save him. No one moved. My grandfather stepped beside me. "You chose a rented throne over your own blood," he said. Now stand in the room you chose. I picked up the envelope. My attorney will contact each of you tomorrow, I said. My accounts are locked. Your access is over. Any repayment, any correction, any consequence will happen in writing. My father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Violet, he said, please. I waited for an apology. He did not give me one, so I turned toward the elevator. Behind me. The penthouse was silent. No music. No laughter, no perfect family performance. Just Grant, Celeste, my parents, and the truth they had invited to dinner. The next morning, I did not wake up feeling victorious. I woke up tired. The kind of tired that sits behind your ribs after years of swallowing things you should have spit out. My attorney called before 9. The bank had frozen any remaining access connected to my parents. The transfer was under review. The fund was protected from further damage. Every future request would have to go through legal channels. Not family pressure, not guilt, not some late-night phone call with my mother crying into the receiver. By noon, Grant's world was already shrinking. 2 people who had attended his Thanksgiving performance sent written statements saying they had been approached about investing. Another asked my attorney if their name could be removed from any future communication involving him. The penthouse management confirmed unpaid bills and began its own process. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal, just paperwork moving forward with the slow, heavy weight of consequences. That was the part my family never understood. Real power does not always slam doors. Sometimes it sends a letter. Celeste called me 18 times that week. I did not answer. Then came the messages. You ruined my life. You were waiting for this. You always hated me. I read them once and saved them. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I was done letting people rewrite history while my fingerprints were still on the wounds. Adrian sent one message. I didn't know about the money. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he only laughed because laughing was easier than standing alone. But by then, I had learned something painful and clean. Silence can still choose a side. My parents tried a softer approach. My mother left a voicemail with that thin, trembling voice she used when she wanted sympathy without accountability. We made a mistake. Violet. We were scared for Celeste. I listened to it in my kitchen while coffee hissed into a mug. They were scared for Celeste, not for me. Not for the daughter sitting alone at Thanksgiving. Not for the daughter whose future they treated like a spare key. My attorney handled the response. A repayment demand, a formal notice, a clear boundary stating they were not to contact me about money, access, or family assets outside legal communication. Grandpa Howard changed his estate documents 2 days later. He did not do it out of anger. He did it with a steady hand and a clear mind. Anyone who had used family trust as a weapon would no longer touch family wealth without oversight. When I returned to my dining room, the table was still there. The flowers had wilted. The candles had burned down into uneven pools of wax. The turkey was gone, packed away by the staff, but the name cards remained. Margaret, Edward, Celeste, Adrian. I picked them up one by one. I did not tear them. I did not throw them into the fire. I placed them in a drawer and closed it softly. That table did not shame me anymore. It reminded me that I had offered love with clean hands. They were the ones who arrived empty. People say family is everything, but that is only beautiful when family means love, honesty, and protection. Family is not a free pass to humiliate you in public. It is not permission to use your money, dismiss your pain, or laugh while you sit alone at a table you built with hope. That Thanksgiving taught me something I should have learned years earlier. Some chairs are not empty because you failed to fill them. Some chairs are empty because the people meant to sit there were never worthy of the place you saved for them. So, now, my table is smaller, quieter, better. I still cook on Thanksgiving. I still light candles. I still set out flowers. But I do not save seats for people who only show up when they need something. If you have ever had to protect your peace from your own family, you are not alone. Share your story in the comments. And subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Because sometimes, walking away is not losing family. Sometimes, it is finally coming home.